got a lot of debris in here, so the first thing we need to do is clear it out, get it ready to plant. One of the things we want to do before we start planting is we want to get rid of any extra little weeds or other plants that might be in there that are going to be in the way. Sometimes you can just pull these out. There's not that many of them. You can till it up in several ways. One of which is just with a shovel, digging down in there, just kind of turning the soil over. Now for heavy soils, or to have a lot of roots in it, rocks or other things, which there actually are some in here, it's always good to have a pick with you. Mattocks is also what it's called. Be careful when using this. Be careful that you know who's around you and what's around you. It'll do a lot of damage with it in a heartbeat. The idea is just to break up the soil so that it's nice and loose and aerated. Also, if you've got any soil amendments, now's a good time to put them in. You can actually break them up as you're going and digging and tilling. You can actually work the amendments into the soil. Your amendments can be different things. They can be fertilizers, it can be organic nutrients, it can also just be leaves. Leaves can make a really good mulch to put in there. And it can add to the organic matrix of the soil, encouraging beneficial bacterial growth as well as earthworms. You can take your tilled soil now, rake it out to where it's nice and level. For this plant, we're going to need the spade or shovel. Now remember, you want a big hole for this. You don't want to dig it exactly to the size of the hole that you would need to fit the pot in. You want to have some extra room in there. This does a couple things. One is it gives extra room for the plant to grow. Better for the surrounding soil to be a little looser. It also gives you more room to move the plant around if you need to get it centered the way you need it. When you're taking the plant out of the pot, you want to reach in and grab it at the base. Now if it's a very tender plant, you might not want to even do that. You might want to just sort of gently grab the entire bush and pull it out. Now this has got a hard enough stem, we can just grab one stem and we'll be okay. And if it slides out easy, then you're home free. If it doesn't slide out easy, if it's kind of pot bound a little bit, you may have to hit it a few times on the bottom and around it to loosen it up. In this case, we're pretty lucky. All right. One other thing you want to look at is on the top of the root ball. You want to look for any weeds that are on there. We've got like a little small seedling weed on this one. You want to pull that out, throw it back in the bucket. Look for any other ones that are in there. If there's a lot of excess leaf matter, go ahead and get that off of there too. You can take some of that and just throw it right back in the hole in some cases. But you want to have that top of the root ball nice and clean without any weed seedlings. And you'll have less weeds in the garden later on. Another thing you want to look at is on your root ball. You want to look at the roots, make sure that they're all nice and healthy. They got a good color. They're not brown or mushy or spongy. If they're real dark in color, sometimes that can indicate root rot. You may have a problem, especially if it's localized in one area. It may be starting and hasn't taken over the rest of the plant yet, but it might not be a good idea to plant that particular plant. Another thing you want to look at is the roots themselves, how they relate to the rest of the pot. Now this one isn't pot bound necessarily, but it does have some roots that have come to the outside of the root ball. And you can just take your clippers or a knife or even the shovel, even your fingers, just kind of break that apart a little bit. You don't even have to necessarily cut it, you can just kind of loosen it up some. If they're real heavy, you might have to cut them up. In this case, they're loose enough, I can just take my fingers, kind of break it up a little bit. You also want to be careful if any of the roots are coming around the top side because those will end up girdling the plant. And girdling is essentially where the roots just keep growing around in a circle. They don't ever get a chance to go out, and it just gets tighter and tighter and tighter, and it's not getting a chance for the plant to get any nutrients or water as much as it should. Alright, I've got my pot in the hole. Now, one thing you can see right away, if you're looking, is it's too deep. Top of the root ball is about 7 inches tall, but the top of my soil line is actually about 9 inches. So if I were to plant it this way and put soil on top of there, this plant would do poorly and very likely would die. So I want to put some soil back in there. You can actually take some of the soil from the plant that fell off on there. That's a good idea. It usually has some leftover fertilizer in there and some organic material. Okay. All right, now it's actually the plant, the soil line is actually a little bit below where the plant is now, which is where you want it to be. Even is okay if it's perfectly even, but usually having it slightly higher, the root ball here slightly higher, is actually a better idea. Keep in mind too that the plant's going to settle over time. You did loosen up the soil in here, so it may sink a little bit. So again, having it a little bit higher than the surrounding soil for a plant this size, about 1 inch. If you had a larger, like a tree or 15, 25 gallon plant, probably want it to be closer to 2 inches because they tend to settle more. One thing you want to look at too is what is the best side of the plant. Now we've kind of got a bare trunk here. If we turn it this way, you've got a lot more leaves facing out. It's also a little bit wider this way. So you look at the width of the plant overall. So this would probably be the best side. Now from the homeowner's point of view, they're going to be looking at it coming this way. So we can turn the plant to where its widest side is perpendicular to where people are looking. And this will give the best view. It'll look the fullest. It'll also present the best view for, from the homeowner's point of view. Okay, now we just go ahead and put the soil back around it. Once you've got it partway full in there, just take a step back. Now that it's holding it, make sure that the plant's straight. You want to look at it from different angles. Make sure that it's as level as it needs to be. Looks like we're good there. Take your hands, push the soil down around in there to get rid of any air pockets. Take some more soil, put it in there. Pack it in there real good. Before you go any further, take another step back for a sec. This isn't as important with smaller shrubs, but you do want to do this with the larger ones because the tilt will be more noticeable. With a shrub like this, it's less likely to turn, to tilt over. Okay, got it all packed down real good. Double check your root ball. Make sure that you've got the root ball right there, at least at the soil level or slightly above it. I'm actually dead even with it right now because of the extra soil that we dug out. Of course, once we smooth this out some, it might be a little bit higher than the surrounding soil. Now that's planted. Now, when you're planting a 1 gallon or a similar size, using a shovel like this that is so much wider than the pot is a waste of energy. Waste of time, not a very efficient way of doing it. Your better choice is to simply use post hole diggers. This is the spot where I want my plant to go. Give it a little twist.